everybody. We're back. Day 2, CineGear 2025 at the Condor Blue Booth, stage 30. Come say hi if you're watching this but not here. That doesn't make any sense. We're here with Michael Cioni. Fun fact, I got sent over a little bit of a bio for you, and I was scrolling through, and there's some things I didn't know in there. So I kind of want to ask you a couple, like, the ignoramus that is me. It's going to come out of left field. Can you explain to me what, is it light iron? What is that? What does that do?
So Light Iron was a post-production company that I started with my brother in 2009, which was the worst year you could possibly start anything.
Why?
Because it was when the housing crisis happened and the market crashed, right? And
couldn't you ride it up?
Well, see, that's what happens when a market is down, like today in a lot of ways. The best thing you can do is understand how to get on the benefit side, the plus side of downturns, because markets and businesses are like water beds. And if there's a depression in one end, there's going to be rise in the other. Yeah. You just have to put yourself in the right position in order to take advantage of it. Light Iron was a post-production company where we focused on doing DI and finishing for major motion pictures that embraced digital, that embraced 4K, that were interested in HDR, and interested in high resolution progressive workflows, iPad dailies. All of that today is totally standard. But in 2009, 10, 11, we were like a pariah, right? Yeah. But only the DPs and directors that were into that. Robert Zemeckis, David Fincher, Don Burgess, Glenn Ficarra. These are the filmmakers that were into that. And they were the ones that became our customers because incumbent companies were slow to try to do the hardest, coolest, newest stuff on digital technologies.
So what did you provide then? Because this is the part that I always get thrown off. Because I obviously Googled it, right? But the part that throws me off is, do you provide personnel? Do you provide technology? Like what? Or is it more of a consulting?
No, it's a facility, full facility for like color correction and dailies and finishing, like a traditional post house. Okay. But instead of, it sounds obvious today, but at the time, if you were a traditional post house, you had to have film telecine and film recording. And it was all based around celluloid and that. Where Light Iron was all based on red camera technology and file-based technology. And that was really, really a new edge to storytelling. Today, it's the standard. But the funny thing, which is a point that we're sort of coming to, is that when good technologies and good users and good people are able to identify emerging trends, they're going to get ridiculed at first, and then everybody eventually catches up. We're in the Condor Blue booth, and one of the things I really love about the products here is the products are betting on an emerging type of storyteller. There's a million ways you can make an Alexa work in the world, but there's only a few ways to make an A7 work in the world. And that's what companies like this have been able to identify, that the A7 community is bigger and has more views than the Alexa community. And that is a new paradigm shift in creation.
That's a good plug, Lucas. Did you know you were doing all that? I don't think he knew he was paradigm shifting.
He does.
So that brings me to something then. Thinking about, doing new stuff then, and I was envisioning film, and then you said going digital. It's like getting the footage to you as the post-pro house. I wonder how you did it then versus actually carrying around film or whatever. And then now, I suppose, you've been involved in other projects that make getting it to places easier, I suppose, right? Like,
yeah, I've worked on somewhere between 150 and 200 movies. Yeah. And traditionally through those processes, the file sizes were so big, we had to use hard drives to move them. For the most part, that hasn't changed that much. Okay. Right? People still put it on a hard drive and walk it to wherever they need it to be or ship it, right? Yeah. But what's going to change is what I believe is that there is a trend that's been emerging that I think is the wrong direction. In fact, if you think of it from a financial perspective, if you were to map the cost of shooting film, that would be very expensive. Sure. Then as we switched to shooting videotape, that got cheaper. Then we started shooting on camera cards and hard drives. That got really cheap. But now it's going back up because we're putting it in the cloud. Yeah. Cloud storage is 40 times more expensive than a hard drive storage. And so putting files in the cloud being so much more expensive, we're actually going the wrong way because it costs more to store it in the cloud than to store it on a hard drive. And that's bad. So I actually believe the trends of moving us to cloud storage is actually going to repatriate. And people are going to realize, they probably are, they're always getting these emails that say, you're out of terabytes. You need to add another terabyte.
Rate plan's going up.
Your plan's going up. Your iCloud's full. Your Google Drive's full. Your Dropbox full. Your Frame.io's full. And people are starting to have it up to here.
So how does that explain then? Because weren't you actively involved in Frame.io and your current, maybe you can explain a little bit about how you feel that way, but also what.
Absolutely. So one, things change, right? Like you experience things and things change. Yeah. When I was at Frame.io, we were building a great product for review and approval. It's the best way to give review and approval in the cloud. Great collaboration. That's what it's for. But people want to store more than just the final output to review in the cloud because they want to collaborate with more files. Frame.io is really not built for that, and it's too expensive to put 50 terabytes in Frame.io. So where are those 50 terabytes? They're on a hard drive. My friend Rami Katrib at Digital Film Tree, he's doing one of the first Blackmagic 17K shows. They shoot 10 to 15 terabytes a day.
Yikes.
How are you going to put that in the cloud? It doesn't make any sense. It has to live on local storage. So what I learned at Frame.io is the cloud is great for a small percentage of your material to share, but the cloud is horrible when you want to share everything, when you want access to everything. And that's the problem that everybody's running into is how do I have access to all my media versus just the sliver that's in the cloud? And so born out of our own pain of getting those bills that kept rising every couple of months, it's another $100. It's another $100. We were paying about $1,500 a month for our cloud storages at my company. Wow. And I just had it up to here. And we said, there's got to be another way.
So you built your own server farm.
So we built a way to take your investment in drives, whether that's a server farm or just an OWC RAID.
Sure.
We built the first peer-to-peer network for creative professionals, so you can turn your local hard drives into a cloud and you serve from your hard drive to your collaborators. And when they access the media, they're just accessing the hard drive sitting on your desk, so nothing is uploaded ever.
It's like filmmaking Napster.
It is very Napster-like. That's exactly right. It's kind of Napster-y. It's a little Pied Piper-y, but that's the idea.
Is that a Silicon Valley joke?
Yeah. But we've had people say, oh, you're building Pied Piper. And we're like, yeah, we kind of are.
Oh, yeah, because that was the idea. It was like they were also focused on compression, right?
The decentralized internet based on good compression. Well, think about this. Apple is one of the only companies in the world that is spending billions on improving the power at the edge for the user's computer. Most companies are building power to be uploading and doing cloud processing in data centers. But Apple's saying, no. The power is going to be at the user side on the edge. And that's not what the other groups are doing. What that means is we are getting access to these M2, M3, M4 computers that are so good that they can do Pied Piper-like compression.
Right, as nodes in a decentralized web or
That's
whatever.
right.
Yeah.
We provide the nodes in the decentralized or federated web access, and then the Apple Silicon allows us to take a ProRes 4K, which is 1,500 megabits per second, and in 200 milliseconds, we can turn it into a 2 megabit per second 4K H.265. And then that can be streamed on an airplane off of a RAID, ProRes 4K, with 200 milliseconds latency.
And these are the end user computers that are doing this?
No, it's the host. The host computer. Yeah, the end user. But
because everybody's an end user, I guess.
Everybody's an end user in a decentralized network.
But it's not like you don't have a server that's doing the conversion.
You are the server.
Right.
And when you buy a Mac computer, if you think about it, you're spending $3,000 on an Apple computer. It's kind of a waste of money if you're just using it for Chrome.
Yeah.
Right? And so by running Strada on it, you're able to fully leverage that processor to actually do all this work. Plus, it works when you're asleep. And the best money you can make is money when you're sleeping, right?
I didn't give you the proper lead-in, So tell me about Strada. And then that was all that. The product is called Strada.
That's right. Well, it's born out of the conversation we were having. And Strada is Italian for street. And we think of workflow as like how people draw like flow charts. They kind of look like little maps. And it's like from point A to point B, how do you get there in your filmmaking workflow? We want to be the road that drives the entire workflow supply chain, and we want to do it without clouds.
That's pretty cool. Did you know that you when you said Strada Street, you did the hand? I don't know if you can help it. It's Italian for
It
student.
happens. It happens.
So, question for you then. I feel like this is a lot of tech talk. I mean, obviously rooted in the way that it helps filmmakers, whatever. What's your sort of Venn diagram or your pie chart? How do you classify yourself these days when it comes to tech bro, or filmmaking nerd or whatever? Where's the line on that?
I've always been right down the middle, and the
Yeah.
way I describe it is really simple. I've used this phrase technative. You need to be ambidextrous, right? You have to be half technology, half creative. People that lean all tech are missing out on the application of that science because they're like, well, I'm just in the tech side. It's like, yeah, but then you're never going to get the application right. Again, fair plug. Condor Blue understands the tech and the application. That's why it's really good stuff. It's not just tech. It's application. They're users. The other side of that coin are creative people. A lot of creative people that I think fall into a very slippery slope are the ones that say, I'm not technical. I'm just creative.
I was going to ask you about
That's
that.
a handicap that you don't want to put on yourself. You need to realize that you're like any muscle that you want to build, you have to give it resistance, and resistance is what builds muscle. Either technology or creativity comes easier to you. Whichever one is harder is the exercise you need to do to build that muscle. Once you build it, you start to learn how to live in the middle and be a technative. And so you don't get tripped up by one or the other, and you have better examples of applied sciences. I make films all the time. I am constantly shooting, and that's loud. And we are always exercising our creative side, and that inspires the technology side. We sit in my living room and we work with a dozen people, and some are creative and some are technical, and we sit all together. We eat together, which is really important, and we're constantly discussing. And Austin, my lead engineer, is always saying to one of our creative team, why aren't you using Strada this way? He wants to understand why. And then the creative team will say, you want to build it this way, but I don't actually work that way. And that way we can be able to put it in the hands of beta users, get more feedback quicker so that we can build it and iterate faster based on their feedback versus relying on gut instincts. I wouldn't name a company, but there are companies here at CineGear that have done so well that they forgot the importance of listening to customers. And they start to believe that they're the expert. And that gets you into a tailspin because all of a sudden you start to lose insight that helps you build the product correctly, because you can't build products for today. You have to build products for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. Otherwise, you're nuts if you're building right now. It's just things change so quick, right? And so it's important that you listen to customers and you listen to them with sober eyes so that you can look at the data and understand that you're not just looking for the data that feels good, like vanity metrics that reinforce your beliefs, but you look for data that almost disagrees with your instincts. So because that's the data that you probably need the most.
It's interesting. I feel like a bit of a personal story, but that the idea of both creativity and then technical prowess, whatever, being a disparate ideas. My YouTube channel was built on a technical angle, but obviously derived from a creative pursuit because it's a photo video channel. Those are creative hobbies up to professions, right?
Yep.
But within that, there's a technical component of it. Obviously, people want to know how it works. What can I get out of it? Which one's better than this? Which one, whatever. So I was like, wow, I like to talk dirty when it comes to tech stuff, so I'll do that. But it almost feels like there's I don't know who's making the rules, but that there are it's like you're either a creative, and then you have this vision of creative people, and it's like there are those weird people over there that draw all the time and their hair are crazy, and then there's the technical people over here, they got the thick frame glasses and the pocket protectors or whatever, and it's like never shall the two meet, right? Yeah. And almost I feel like that gets reinforced where you almost have to pick a lane, and you have to decide, hey, are you going to be technical or are you going to be creative? And I don't think it needs to be that way. And so I like your analogy of the just different muscles or different exercise to do to fortify that. Do you ever find either whether it's like an imposter syndrome or some sort of limit on you where it's like that whole staying in your lane idea where when you're putting on one hat to run a tech company or something like that, where it's like, oh, I'll leave it to the creatives. Do you ever feel like I said, who's making the rules? I don't know. But that push or pull, and or do you just kind of be like, no, everybody should be both? Yeah.
No, I don't, because it's so much more important to follow logic than to follow rules.
Yeah.
And so in order to do that, you have to have the foresight to be able to focus. Wow. That's interesting.
That's an incredibly aggressive scooter.
That really is. What's really important is to be able to focus on being able to discover something that hasn't yet been done. So what I always tell the teams that I lead is that we are sailors of cyberspace, because we think of the explorers of yesteryear. They were sailors because that was the only way to discover new territory. You had to get on a boat and just sail till you ran into some land, right? Well, all the land's been discovered. So what can we discover? We have to discover things in cyberspace, because that's the stuff that hasn't been discovered yet, right? And so we're sailors in that space, trying to find areas and uncover ideas and workflows and technology that we can facilitate and create a new amalgamation of things that is a new property. And you stick a flag in it and say, this is mine, right? Your YouTube channel is unique in how you homogenize together tech and story, creative and technology. And you've created that with your personality in it, and it's new. And when where you're at now and where you started, I assume, are very, very far apart from each other. And
well, I deleted a lot of videos, so really far apart.
and that's part of the story, right? But you were, as a long-standing, growing platform of YouTube, and what you've been able to do with it, you've been able to pioneer new spaces, right? And then other people emulate you, or they get inspired by you. They do another thing. So we have to be thinking about, like, what is farmed soil, and that's what we need to be looking for. Now, that's not new. All the filmmakers and storytellers that we look up to did that in their day, in one way, shape, or form. What happens is the industry, if you will, starts to try to refarm what they created, which often works, but it isn't creation itself, because they're not, most people aren't pioneering a process or a type of story or a style. They're copying it.
Sure.
And only a few people actually pioneer it. To be a pioneer means it really is, there is no friend to phone when you're in a pickle. Yeah. You have to figure it out. And a few of us love to be in that edge, right?
A lot of self-doubt in that too, though.
So much. Yeah. So much. And so it's like, if you think about, like, you ever seen, like, those resorts you can go to, like in Africa, and you see the jungles over there and all the dangerous animals are there, but here you have like a spa,
right?
And you want to, like, most people want to live and see the jungle,
right?
But they want the spa and the air conditioning and stuff like that. But a few people say, no, I want to live in the jungle. We're going to go in there and we're going to make our house there, like the fire swamp in Princess Bride. Like, you want to live in there and build a summer home. That's where creative people need to be. If you really want to do something dramatic, you've got to be able to live in the jungle, because that's where all the great stuff's going to happen. It's going to inspire you to do that, versus in the safety net of a safe space.
Sure.
Not everybody's built for the jungle, though. It'll kill most people. But a few people that feel that calling need to respond to that, listen to that, and get in there and put themselves in harm's way to get the best work out of them.
Let me ask you something. What gets your rocks off creatively these days then? Working on anything, or even if it's just for fun?
I'm really interested in seeing. I mentioned I worked on almost 200 feature films, so a lot of movies, and I was a real stickler for quality. And I worked on films like Avatar, Pirates of the Caribbean, Social Network, Underworld, 42, Flight. And in those, working for those filmmakers and directors, I learned how to really increase the standards and fight for the last mile. What's really interesting is all that work was good and it was well intended, but now when I see what YouTube is able to do, YouTube doesn't have standards. It doesn't care about standards. And the people that create for YouTube don't have QC reports, so they don't have special, like, run times and commercial breaks and stuff like that. And it's interesting that what I've learned is to understand all the standards that we've come up with are really important to know, but they're not necessary to follow anymore. And I think they've become speed bumps. And if we just instinctively continue to respond and do whatever the standards taught us to, we're going to continue to lose pace with what's happening on YouTube, where what people do on YouTube is they just follow logic, right? They don't care what the rules are, right?
Well, some channels.
I think that's what gets me the most excited, is to see where YouTube is going to go. And here's the opportunity, and people that are watching this is the opportunity, in my opinion. YouTube is, a year ago, YouTube was 10% of all television viewing.
Oh, like, and now how anybody at home watching TV?
Anyone at home. 10% was last July.
Isn't YouTube like the most streamed platform now or whatever?
By a single platform, yes.
Yeah.
But this year they went up, they're projected in July to be 12%, which is a 2% increase in 12 months. That is an incredible amount of rapid increase. Yeah, because HBO isn't going to grow by 2% in a year.
Sure.
They don't have that power. They don't have that speed. They don't have that acceleration. Apple can't do it, right? And so when you see how fast YouTube's growing, then this is the interesting thing. 99.9% of material on YouTube is nonfiction.
Right, yeah.
People aren't going to ever fully relinquish their desire to watch fiction. Like, we're still going to want that. We're being given less of it because the outlets for consuming content is now, the majority is nonfiction. But that's why we still celebrate fiction shows. So the opportunity that I think is, what of the YouTube community is going to start making fiction? Because fiction is 100 times, good fiction is 100 times harder than nonfiction.
Make it for YouTube though, or branch out of YouTube and then start, going traditional or whatever?
I don't think it would ever be traditional, because I think that ship has sailed. I wouldn't want to, that's like buying a ticket to the Titanic. Like, I wouldn't do that. I believe there is a new, here's an analogy. 10 years ago, we had two major ways electronically to communicate: email or text.
Right.
And you knew this is a text and this is an email. And then 10 years ago, a company called Slack came along and they said, well, it's not email and it's not text. There's something in the middle. And they wedged that open. And Slack is very distinctly different than email and text. I actually think the same thing's going to happen in content delivery for narrative. Today, on one end of the spectrum, we have YouTube. And on the other end, let's say there's Netflix.
Sure.
We don't really have a lot in the middle for narrative. And that's the opportunity.
In a new platform, or do you think one of those platforms?
I think it has to be a new platform, because you have to help the customer understand this is a narrative platform and it's not getting confused or noisy with non-narrative stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Because you wouldn't want to be watching the one type of YouTube video and then have it autoplay something crazy afterwards.
And it has to be a premium experience. YouTube is not a premium experience. There's ads everywhere and it's hard to see what's going on. And that's their platform. It does what it does very well. But when you look at Netflix, it doesn't look or feel like YouTube at all. It's a premium platform. And so what we are going to need is a premium platform experience to play narrative content, but the content's generated by UGC and not by studios. That, to me, is the biggest opportunity for narrative people. And it's a huge opportunity for narrative to really get into. And I think it's the UGC community in YouTube that is going to say, I want to get into narrative now, and YouTube isn't a great place for me to do that. Is my only alternative to sell it to a studio? That's pretty steep. Or do I have to make everything for a film festival? That's also pretty steep. And if they already say, if you got millions of people that watch your stuff today anyway, you don't want to give that up and go to the bottom of the line just to try to get in a festival. That doesn't even feel like that makes sense. How do you leverage your audience, right? And this is why there's a new opportunity for the UGCers that want to do narrative. Now there's a reason to get this equipment and start realizing all the lessons you've taught and many people have taught about lighting and cinematography and framing and editing and effects. Now we can put it, instead of just trying to use it for like a demonstration, which a lot of people do on YouTube, is they make one scene in their backyard. Where's the other 88 scenes, right? That's what is the next opportunity.
I do know a lot of the people that I talk to that are in similar niches on YouTube or adjacent, that they'll say, this is great, but one day I want to make my own film, or one day I want to. So, I mean, small sample size, but I feel like that if that's indicative of a larger swath, then for sure it seems like that platform. Now, are you dangling out there as an idea for somebody to pick up, or is this something you're kind of scratching with in the,
I started this Strada thing. I'm stuck to it right now. If I wasn't doing Strada, I'd probably want to build. This would be a really interesting thing to build. It's a new platform that borrows from Netflix and borrows from YouTube. but someone else gonna have to do it. But I guarantee it'll happen. And I'm not exactly sure what it'll look like or how it'll play out, but it'll happen. And this is the opportunity that creative people really, really need, because YouTube can't do it all. And Hollywood studio platforms that we pay for and watch, they can't do it all either. And if everyone is expected to be able to make content from wherever they live, which is now possible, that content, I think we want to see those stories told where those people live. You don't have to come to California to do it.
Yeah.
But if it's going to be a premium platform experience in its narrative, it has to be good. Here's something fascinating about our brains. We will suspend disbelief really easily if it's like a commercial. Like if things have weird continuity and people don't look right and it changes, we don't really care. But as soon as it's a serious narrative, if a cup moves the wrong way, we're like, whoa, what's wrong, right? In nonfiction, we're very forgiving.
Sure.
But in fiction, we're not. And we want to really believe these characters to a point that we have emotional connections to them. That means it's high fidelity, it's high quality. And I know that there's UGC out there that really wants to like achieve that, and they want to tell those stories, but it's really going to be hard. And I think I would love there to be something as an alternative, even though we're on the Universal lot. I don't want this to be the only game that we have to play. It's too hard. It's too steep. And there's obviously some cracks in the armor. So it's an opportunity. It's an invitation for someone to start feeling it.
Well, as a YouTuber, I find that very inspirational. I've taken up a lot of your time now, but Michael Cioni, thank you so much for talking to me and sharing your thoughts.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And cut. I keep saying that. Nobody's listening to the cut.